Welcome back to the Dershow. Before we get to the subject at hand, obviously the mass murderer in Boise, Idaho, made a deal, and he's going to serve 4 life sentences without parole and didn't get the death penalty. Some of the family members are upset, others are not. Prosecutor's plea bargain. It would have been, I think, an open and shut case for conviction. It might not have been an open and shut case for the death penalty. You never know what jurors will think on that. Sometimes jurors just hold out against the death penalty. In any event, fait accompli, guilty plea, no explanation for why he did it and what the motive was. Hard to believe somebody who was just 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, walk into a dorm and murder 4 innocent, beautiful, wonderful people like that. But human nature is inexplicable. My newest book is I just got the first copy. It's not published yet, but you can get it online. It's called Trump to Harvard, Go Fund Yourself. Harvard to Trump, Let's Make a Deal. Who will win? And it has the cartoon on the cover. They just sent me the first 4 or 5 copies. It's being printed and published now, but you can get it online. If you're a college, you can get it free. But if you're an ordinary person, you got to pay a few dollars. I don't know what it is. It's a few dollars. I don't remember exact price, but this is my this is number 58. I'm trying to get to 60, but it's realistic at this point. I've done 6 of them in the last 2 years, so that's pretty good. No, these are small books. These are not full books. These are, they're 70, 80, 90 pages, but they make the point. So I'm very proud of it. All right. The Sean Combs case, P. Diddy. The jury did the right thing and the judge did the wrong thing. Not surprising. I have more faith in juries than I do in judges. The jury acquitted Sean Combs of the most serious charges, RICO violations. He's not a racketeer. Sexual trafficking. He wasn't trafficking. He wasn't sending people to other people for money. He wasn't sending 12-year-olds, to do terrible things for a profit. What he did was pretty awful, and his lawyers admitted it. But he was convicted essentially of just sex for money, not even money. It's just transactional sex. He wasn't convicted of anything non-consensual. He wasn't convicted of sex with a minor. He was convicted. It's as if, the conviction is a guy from New York meets a woman in a bar and says, "Hey, I know a great restaurant in New Jersey. Let's go to New Jersey." And while he's in the process of going to New Jersey, having just, asked her to come with him, he has in mind that he's going to pay for a really fancy meal with a really nice bottle of wine, $500 bill, and then she's going to sleep with him. Yeah, that would violate the Mann Act. If you cross state lines for an immoral purpose, and an immoral purpose includes having sex transactionally, or if you offer somebody, look, if you have sex with me, I'm a rock star, I'm a producer, I'm a rap person, but maybe I'll help you get a job. That's transactional sex. It treats the people who consent as not being adults. You don't have to accept it. You say no. I'm not going to take the job. But if you say yes, why is that a crime? It's not a crime. And so, in my view, this guy, who I sure wouldn't want him to date any of my friends, was convicted of something that's not a crime. 2 counts of interstate travel for immoral purposes, for purposes of engaging in prostitution. It wasn't even prostitution. It was, fancy living in exchange for sex. Look, he may have done other terrible things, but that's not what he was convicted of. And so this judge just now denied him bail. On what ground? This guy's not going to run anywhere. It's absurd. He has one of the nicest houses. I pass it by all the time. It's right near, not far from my little tiny condo in Miami, Florida. He lives on Star Island. His property is probably worth $40 or $50 million. I think he has 2 properties on the most expensive island, one of the most expensive islands in the world. He's one of the most recognizable people. This decision by this judge was just vindictive. He didn't like the verdict. He thought there should be a conviction. And so he's going to probably sentence him to a little bit of time in prison. He can't sentence him to a lot of time, but he'll probably sentence him to a little bit of time in prison in excess of the year he's already spent for having had bail denied. And but he's going to do it. He's going to come up with some pretense. The appellate issues aren't good appellate. Yeah, they are good appellate issues. I can win this appeal. This is not a strong case. You don't get people convicted for consensual transactional sex. Moreover, what the jury saw was not traditional, transactional, conventional sex. It was videotapes of him beating up mercilessly his girlfriend. It's a terrible thing, but it's not relevant to whether he crossed state lines. What's relevant to whether he crossed state lines is a picture of him going through the Holland Tunnel or the Lincoln Tunnel or some other George Washington Bridge. That's the crime. The crime isn't beating anybody. He wasn't convicted of that. He was acquitted of anything involving violence, anything involving racketeering, anything involving sexual trafficking, all of that. He was acquitted. The jury didn't believe beyond a reasonable doubt the prosecution's case. The judge may have, but the jury didn't. You're not the 13th jury, Your Honor. You don't get to decide that he's guilty if the jury decides he's not guilty, and you don't get to decide it implicitly by denying him bail or denying him time served for his sentence. People don't go to jail for transactional sex, for voluntary, consensual sex based on the hope of getting an advantage. There is no such law. Maybe there should be, but there isn't. I don't think there should be, but there isn't. Adult women should not be treated like children. If they consented, that's the end of the matter. They consented. I don't care if they consented to help themselves. I don't care if this guy said, unless you consent, you'll never work in this business again. So you don't work in the business. That's all. That's not coercion. That's giving you a terrible choice. Again, this is not the mafia, but the Godfather. He may have made an offer they can't refuse, but they can refuse it. They can refuse it. They can say no. And there are some cases right now pending where the defense tried to put in evidence that some women said no, and the court said, no, we're not going to allow that evidence. Why not? Of course you allow in the evidence, because the fact that some women said no shows that the women who said yes did it volitionally and voluntarily. And so transactional sex is not an excuse. Now, people are going to say, oh, Dershowitz, he's saying this because he was accused. Of course I was accused falsely. And everybody now knows that. The woman who accused me, who committed suicide, has now admitted before she killed herself that she may have confused me with someone else. They have misidentified me. I never met her, never heard of her, never had sex with anybody other than my wife during the relevant time period. So I am completely, totally, categorically innocent. So I'm never going to let that influence my legal analysis. If you think I'm making this legal analysis to vindicate myself, no, you're wrong. I don't need to make a legal analysis to do that. I know, and anybody who's thoughtful knows that I was falsely accused. I've said that from day one. I proved it beyond any doubt by all my records and all my travel receipts and everything else. I don't have to prove anything else. But I still want to maintain the right to comment on public cases like the Combs case, where he never, ever, ever should have been charged for transactional, voluntary adult sex. That's not what we do in America. We can criticize you for that. You can condemn you. We can fire you. maybe, I doubt it, you can bring a civil lawsuit. I don't think a civil lawsuit should succeed if a woman made a decision to engage in consensual sex because she thought she would lose an opportunity to become a rap singer or a film star if she didn't consent. That is not a crime. That's treating women like children. That's denying women agency. That's sexist. And it's wrong. It's wrong to put a woman in that position, sure, but being wrong doesn't make it a crime. People confuse that. This is not the heavenly court. In the heavenly court, Combs is going to be asked, if there is a heavenly court, did you coerce women into having sex with you because you said they wouldn't get a job as a rap singer as part of your group? Yeah, wow, that's not good. You might have to go to hell instead of heaven. Leave that to God. Leave that to priests, to ministers, to rabbis. Leave it to your mother. But don't bring it to court. Those aren't cases. Those are not civil cases. They're not criminal cases. They're not cases. The law should have nothing to do with consensual transactional sex of the kind that he was convicted of. And that's what, remember, what he was convicted of was transporting. I don't know what that means, transporting. I took my wife to New Jersey several times from New York. Actually, she drove. So maybe she transported me for improper purposes. But who thinks that taking somebody from New Jersey to New York, New York to New Jersey, for purposes of having consensual voluntary sex should be a federal crime? I don't care if you're a liberal or conservative, if you're a man or a woman, if you're a feminist or a sexist. That's just not an appropriate subject for the courts. It's just not an appropriate subject for the courts. The judge disagrees with that. And so the judge denies bail. Now, the statute says that you're entitled to bail if you have reasonable arguments on appeal. And there are some very strong arguments on appeal. I think I could win this appeal. I think a good appellate lawyer could win this appeal. There are lots and lots of very good appellate issues and lots of good lawyers in the case who could, I think, successfully win this appeal. So that's an issue that the trial court has no special competence on. It's the Court of Appeals that has special competence. Trial judges never like to say that there are good appellate issues, because if there's an appeal and it's reversed, the judge gets a flunking grade. He's failed. The district court judge fails when a judge reverses his conviction. That's why judges hate when they're reversed. And the other issues are, is he a danger? He's not a danger. He was not convicted of doing anything violent. He may have, but he wasn't convicted of doing anything violent. Is he likely to flee? Is he likely to escape? Of course not. The dumbest thing that he could possibly do. He's facing small time in prison. Actually, he's probably facing a little bit. The bail decision seems to telegraph an absurd conclusion by the judge that maybe I'm going to give him some time just to, not for what he was convicted of. Nobody would get time for that. I'm going to give him time for what he was acquitted of. That's what judges do all the time. That's what judges did in the OJ case. We won the OJ case, and then he was charged with a crime that nobody's ever charged with, trying to retrieve his own memorabilia. And he got a, I don't remember, 7-year sentence. He wasn't sentenced to 7 years for trying to take back his memorabilia. He was sentenced to 7 years for being acquitted for a murder that the judge believed he committed. And maybe he did. I mean, that's, everybody is entitled to have judgment on that. Remember, the presumption of innocence doesn't operate outside of court. It only operates in court. You can decide whatever you want about OJ, about Von Bulow, about any of my clients. I have no stake in that. In fact, my mother, when people would go over to my mother and say, OJ is really guilty, or Klaus Von Bulow is guilty, and your son got him off. And my mother would say, just makes him a better lawyer. Just shows he's a better lawyer. So my mother knew how to answer those kinds of arguments, but not too many other people do. I have a friend, a very bright guy. I went to college with him. He doesn't understand it. He just doesn't understand it. He accuses me of being the people I represent. That's what Joe McCarthy did. I expect more of you, Alan. You know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to give your last name, but you know better than that. You know that John Adams didn't support the Boston Massacre killers when he defended them, that Abraham Lincoln didn't support the many murderers who he defended, that other great lawyers in history. You don't identify with your clients any more than a doctor does with his patients. Would my friend Alan condemn a doctor who treated the people I've defended? I don't know, but he condemns me for who I have defended, and many other of my friends do that. Some do it openly, some do it quietly, but many people do it. I would say most Americans condemn lawyers for the clients they defend. I was on Piers Morgan today debating some character who purports to represent the Palestinians, and he kept saying, I'm a terrorist, Dershowitz is a terrorist because he defends terrorists. First of all, some of the terrorists I've defended have been Palestinian terrorists. I defended two of them early in my career, and I supported the rights of terrorists to get fair trial. So I'm a terrorist because I defend the terrorists. Piers Morgan went after him with a vengeance and showed, obviously, that you don't identify a lawyer with his client, but that's what people do. I don't know why this judge did what he did. I was very surprised. I thought, in light of the verdict in the case, which essentially is an acquittal, two minor charges of transporting somebody, even transporting is such a sexist concept. Two people get on a plane. Is one transporting the other? The woman drives. Is he transporting her? What does transporting even mean in the context of this absurd Mann Act statute that was passed in the age when adultery was regarded as a crime? It's a statute that shouldn't be on the books, and it shouldn't be misused in the way it was misused. Look, I have no brief for Sean Combs as a person. I've never heard him sing a song. I have no idea. I'm not a rap aficionado. I didn't even know what he does, but he's rich and he lives on Star Island. I know that about him, and I know what he was convicted of, and what he's convicted of is not and should not be a crime. And so I think it'll be reversed on appeal. It certainly should be reversed on appeal. The judge may very well sentence him symbolically to an additional year or 6 months. I think that would be wrong, but that will be challenged as well. I think the denial of bail pending appeal will be challenged in the Court of Appeals, and I would hope that the Court of Appeals will rule in favor of Combs and say, look, there's a good appellate issue here. He's not going to flee. He's not going to be a danger to the community. So the law says we have to let him out. Yeah, he's wealthy. He can afford millions of dollars of bail, but that's the way the bail system operates. All right. We'll see what happens. That's one area where my predictions have been wrong. I predicted earlier in the day, before I knew anything about the case other than the verdict, I predicted that he would probably get bail and that he would probably get time served. That may still happen, but certainly it hasn't happened at the trial level. And so his lawyers and he are appropriately disappointed. All right, let's read some letters. What is your opinion of the merits of birthright citizenship? Trump has issued an executive order which is contrary to the Constitution and previous Supreme Court cases. What do you think? Okay. As a matter of policy, I think birthright citizenship is dumb. I think it's stupid. I don't think anybody should be a citizen based on the accident of their birth. People should be citizens based on their loyalty to a country, based on their commitment to a country, based on how long they've lived there. But if you spend 2 hours in America being born and then left, never came back, why should you be a citizen? It's absurd. I don't know other countries that maybe some other countries do that, but it's an accident of our Constitution. It was designed to make sure that the children of slaves were citizens because they were born in the United States. So I think it's dumb, but it's in the Constitution. It's in the 14th Amendment. And so you have to abide by it. And so I think President Trump is wrong to have issued an executive order saying that he has rescinded birthright citizenship. The only way that can be rescinded without a constitutional amendment is to have the legislature say that certain people who were born in the United States and don't spend any time here are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So that's possible, and maybe Congress will do that. But absent that, I don't think the Supreme Court will uphold the executive order that Trump has issued. It may be the only one he loses. He's going to win on the universities. He's going to win on most of the deportations on the merits. He may lose on some of the procedural safeguards, but he'll win on the merits. Why is the Diddy case important enough to be newsworthy? Am I missing something? No, I don't think it's important enough to be newsworthy. I think that, the fact that he conducted himself in this way and he's a famous guy, is interesting. But things are newsworthy based on celebrity. I never thought that the OJ case was that newsworthy, or the Von Bulow case. I became well known as a result of those cases, but they were not the most important issues of the day by any chance. So I agree with your sentiment. If Hamas, as you say, is going to run Gaza no matter what does finishing the job in Gaza even mean? Israel could carry on, according to what you say. Hamas with new leadership would still retain power. I think that's the issue. That's what Netanyahu is so concerned about. That's what I'm concerned about if President Trump is putting undue pressure on Netanyahu to accept the deal just to make sure there's a deal and a ceasefire. The deal has to be one that guarantees that there's no repetition of October 7th. If there's a deal, a ceasefire, and then it happens again, it's going to be a failure. Remember what happened on October 7th. October 7th, there was a ceasefire in effect. On October 6th, there was a ceasefire. And Hamas simply violated and killed 1,200 people and hijacked and captured and took as hostages 250, most of whom are dead now. President Trump must not try to prevent Israel from following through with whatever still needs to be done to ensure its existence. I agree. It continues. Sometimes Trump pushes too hard to obtain a deal so he can say, looky, I made a deal, when it leaves things in a tenuous, incomplete state for Israel and for good anti-regime Iranians. And to have the PA take over Gaza, which is what Saudi Arabia wants, is just plain dumb. Look, it's certainly better than the current situation. I know the guy I debated today is from the PA. I surely wouldn't want him to take over the Palestinian, the Gaza Strip or any other areas. But there are some very good Palestinians that are very, very decent people among some of the Palestinians, even among some of the leaders. So I wouldn't foreclose the possibility of that. Israel should not accept an ultimatum from Trump. Trump took the action in Iran. I'm thankful for that. But that cannot let him control Israel. Netanyahu must hold strong. If he needs to go further without U.S. help, so be it. It's not only the question of the help. It goes beyond that. It's that nobody wants to be Zelensky. No leader of any foreign country. That's why every time there's an Oval Office meeting, you see the leaders of the foreign countries, whether it be France or England or India or any ally foreign country, Canada, they're all making nice to Donald Trump. They don't want to be Zelensky. And, obviously, the president of the United States, the most powerful man on earth, has the power to make life miserable, not only for the individual, but for his country. And Netanyahu is smart enough and shrewd enough to understand Trump and to understand that he should not alienate him. And so, he may have to do things that he doesn't otherwise want to do. Now, there's an alternate explanation here, and I give it some credence. Look, it may very well be that Netanyahu wants to make a ceasefire, wants to make peace, but he can't do it without losing his government because these two right-wing extremists, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, threaten to leave the government. But if he does it, because Trump makes him do it, maybe he can preserve his government and at the same time make peace. So there is a part of me which believes possibly that Netanyahu, at least part of him, welcomes the pressure from Trump. Maybe he welcomed the pressure from Trump on Iran. After all, Israel was running out of Iron Dome rockets, and maybe they would have been more vulnerable. Maybe this was a good time for a ceasefire. I'm not a military expert. I don't know the answers to that question, and I don't know the answer to the question of whether a ceasefire now would simply be a pause that allowed Hamas to rearm and reconstitute itself and commit another October 7th? I don't know the answer to that question, but I set out as a possible scenario. Maybe Trump and Netanyahu have agreed, as they did previously when they pretended that there was not going to be an American strike, all the while knowing there was going to be one, and they pretended to have a dispute when they weren't really having a dispute. Maybe it's possible that that's happening now. Maybe it's possible that, without saying so, Netanyahu is welcoming a little pressure to be able to use that to offset the threats of his two extreme right-wing people who don't represent the mainstream of Israel, but are sufficiently central to the very tenuous government that Netanyahu has forged. That maybe it's a ploy, or maybe it's a nuance, and it's partly right, partly wrong. I don't know. It's complex, and we'll wait and see. On Monday, we'll have a better sense, because there probably will be an Oval Office show all and tell all, in which I suspect both Netanyahu and Trump will proclaim strong friendship to each other, and Netanyahu will do what Trump tells him to do, even if it's not exactly what he would like him to do. Okay, this is one of these emails that I hate to read, but you have to read it because it's so important for everybody to know who's out there. So this is Alan. Aren't you rich enough with all your shares? I don't have a lot of shares. Properties, gold, diamonds. I don't have any diamonds. And artworks. I have some art. I love it. That you lowered yourself to make those podcasts to make a few extra bucks. Okay, that's fair comment. But now here's the last sentence. Just what you expect. Typical of your tribe. Greed, greed, greed. All right, I challenge you to name any group in America that, proportional to its population, has given more charity to non-Jewish causes than the Jews. And of course you can't. Jews have financed many of the hospitals in this country. How many hospitals around the country in the smallest towns are named Maimonides, Mount Sinai, you name it, Jewish names? They were given those Jewish names because Jewish doctors couldn't get jobs in Columbia. They were excluded. They couldn't get jobs at other hospitals. So they founded their own hospitals, gave them Jewish names, and they are now supported overwhelmingly by Jewish charities. But the Metropolitan Opera, the Philharmonic in New York, the Museum of Natural History, all of these non-Jewish institutions are supported enormously. People complain so many Jews contribute to Harvard, even Jews who didn't go to Harvard. But one of the great fears that Harvard had is that they would be cutting off funding by Jews. So don't talk to me about Jewish greed. I'm sure I give a much higher percentage of my salary and my income to charity than you do. And I am not greedy. I'm very generous. I am a little cheap sometimes. Maybe you can use that stereotype. I was brought up poor, so I can't use a tea bag once. When I use a tea bag, I dip it, and I drink the tea, but then I take the tea bag and I put it in a glass and I use it a second time. At the same time, I'll write out a $10,000 check to a charitable cause that I agree with, but I'll use the tea bag twice. I just don't believe in wasting good tea. So, it's complicated. I grew up poor. I'm not poor now. I'm not rich. I'm very comfortable. The guy who was involved in the automobile accident, and the policeman comes over to him, the Jewish guy, the policeman comes over and says, "So, sir, are you comfortable?" He was lying in a stretcher. "Are you comfortable?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I make a living. So, yeah, I'm comfortable. I have nice art. I have a couple of little pieces of gold that are my hedge, but I am not greedy, and neither is my tribe." First of all, I don't have a tribe. Some of the people I hate in the world most are Jews, self-hating Jews, anti-Zionist Jews, anti-Israel Jews, people who put their Judaism last on the list of their priorities. So I don't have a tribe. And if I did, it wouldn't be a greedy tribe. It would be a very generous tribe. But I like people to know this kind of anti-Semitism still exists, both on the right and on the left. Boy, by next week, we'll have so many new issues. I will be broadcasting next week from a vacation. My destination is a secret, but a vacation. And you'll probably be able to tell where I am next week. But I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, if you want to get a copy of Go Fund Yourself, you can probably order it in advance on Amazon. But if you're going to order one of my books now, please order The Preventive State. The Preventive State is my legacy, is the book I care most about, the book I'm most proud of, and I think that is the most important book I've ever written. So if you can read one of my books, please read that. See you all next week.